Thank you for having me. Yeah. First, I will talk a little bit about our brand, what we're doing. So we are a global savings group. So we have 7 brands, actually 8. We operate in 24 countries. We have 40 plus platforms, and we're doing business with 20,000 retailers. So I will say a little bit in order to understand a little bit of our architecture overview. So what do? We do some stuff in Angular 2, mostly microservices in Java EE. We are not still here. We still have some monolith applications. As you can see, we are using Elasticsearch. We are using AWS on all our infrastructure. So here where you can see nodes, so our node instances are talking to our APIs in order to get the data, and this is what we present to our users. How this looks in detail, a little bit, I don't know, do you see this good? So regarding microservice architecture is that we have Angular parts, we are using API gateway. Each microservice is a Java EE application. We are using Dynamo DB to store data. We are using DynamoDB streams in order to stream the data to Lambda, and basically then we send this to SNS event, and then we broadcast to our other microservice, which is aggregating this data and creating object graphs. So this is where we create our business logic, and then we put it in Elasticsearch. Why I'm saying that? Because at this part, basically, this is where we connect our node part. And this is our node application. So we have 5 teams, actually 4. We postponed 1. We had 2 years ago, we built one Node.js framework in order to make more our work productive, so our teams productive. And then later on, I think last year, not later on actually, since beginning of Angular beta, we started working our Angular part and actually UI part, and then this is where we fell out in TypeScript. So in order to, if you're wondering why TypeScript, it's basically a subset of JavaScript, which gives you simply, by my opinion, better productivity. Then we spot that we can do that with Node.js as well. So, and this is what we built now. So we create a new framework, which basically has dependency injection, it has modular design, it has routing, MVC structure. It's easy to test, and what is good that, as you can see here, that each of module can be also individual application. What was the decision also? Because we have, for example, we have Java E teams, we have Angular 2 teams. So we want to create a kind of API which is similar to Angular, because everybody is already familiar with that, and our Node.js developers also, which doing full stack, also like it. So a little bit about dependency injection. It's inspired by Angular 2. So API is nearly the same. You can see that we have injectable decorators. So we are using decorators. Does anybody knows what dependency injection is? Do I need to explain that? Okay. So we have injectable. So basically, which is behaving. First question: who here knows Angular 2? Who was working with Angular? Please raise your hand. Okay. So we are using injectable in order to mark our classes to be recognizable by basically our dependency injection. Also, provider is the same as injectable, but you can also provide dependencies. So you can say, okay, I need service A, service B to this class. And you can use inject and then a token, basically, and at certain level, your token will be delivered. You will see that in a moment. So what that means is that you include injector. It's kind of similar. Syntax is that you basically can create your, as you can see, we have a car. You have to decorate it with injectable, and you can inject your tokens. You can inject it in two ways. You can say it, okay, I will inject it at the constructor, or you can inject it like this. So, and during the runtime, framework will know what to deliver. For testing purposes, you can use injector in order to create your class, and you can provide injectables like this. Then afterwards, your injector instance is created, you can get the instance. So this is just various types how you can provide it. It's basically same API, like nearly the same API like in Igor. And as you can see, that you can provide any kind of token, you can use a value. Same goes that you can also create own factory and then provide different dependencies, and dependency injection will know how to provide this. So we have, when I get back to modular, so now I will go through the modules itself. So how you define the module? So module is just a simple class where you can define imports, which is basically a different module. You can define a controller, which can be any kind of controller, so which is attached to this module. And what you also do to this module is that you define routing. So what is good is that each module can have own routes. And later on, if you see that your project goes too big, you can simply chop it and say, okay, bootstrap this module separately from this one. So what module decorator accepts is imports and exports. Name, it has to have a name. It has a controllers and providers. So what is a provider? Provider is any kind of service which you provide to your class. So dependency injection know that at this level I have to create a new instance for example, logger in this case, or router. Name, if you don't define on a root module, it's okay. So for a Bootstrap module, you don't have to define it. For every kind of module which you import, you have to define it. So let's get back to services. As you can see that service is as well as simple class, which you can define, and all what you have to do in order to be available to the framework is that you have to say, okay, this is injectable. And you can see what kind of type of classes which you can use via dependency injection is, and decorators, so the module, controller, filter, and provider. So, and service, you can, when you instantiate a service and provide to the module, it's basically a singleton to the module. But if you provide it to controller, they're not, because each controller is basically a new request instance. So whenever a request comes, the new controller instance will be created. And if you provide a provider there, then it will basically instantiate a new service there. As I mentioned already, controller is initialized and destroyed on each request, and controller has to have a name. because you will see later on in routing, is that you can have pretty dynamic list. So you can specify which rule will go to which controller and which action. That's why you see that you have decorator action, for example, like here, redirect, and you have name of the controller. As you can see, basically that each controller have kind of chain hooks. Is in this case is that you can hook on before each. You can basically say before action name, then action name, after action name, and then after each action. This is handy if you need some kind of logic which you apply that you don't replicate to multiple functions. So also what also controller does, it has filters. They're handy as well because you want to apply something before controller itself, for example, like caching. So if you want to, because what end result is from action is a buffer or a string. If so, for example, you have a cache filter, you can say, okay, now I will put this in memory or in Redis or whatever cache service you want to use, and at the end you can get it from there and then stop the chain. So because each basically hook is an action of chains. As I mentioned already, so those are controller decorators where you can have certain logic. So in order to define an action, there is no any kind of naming declaration, so that you have to have a function name in order to know which route it has to execute. Only thing what is really matters is action. So you use a decorator and you provide ID. So for example, this is action ID, and then to action methods, you can use parameters which you can define to route. And what chain it is this actually chain is this action chain, and this data which you chain from one to other. So you can stop chain at any time and provide the result to browser. And as I mentioned already, you can use inject in order to inject your stuff into controllers. This is really nice because each of those tokens have types, and you don't have to look in a documentation in order to get suggestions. You can just use tool to have that. As I mentioned already, filter, for example, this is example filter where you can provide priority and you can apply before and after. And for example, here it will get fully constructed HTML, for example, and you will get it and you will return it as a buffer or as a string, and system actually framework will know what to do. Do you have any questions? Sorry, I was just going and going and going. If you have any questions, just simply stop me and yeah.
Is this open source? Or
yes.
What's the name?
Typix. It's still in beta. We are working on it, but what is really good, this convention is already 2 years in production. And so we are building now new version in TypeScript. It's beta 10. But it's fully stable, and already teams are working on it, and soon we will put one in production. And when we create a full documentation for everything, then we will create also a website, and it will be branded. So how you can do router? So you can define routes. And this is how you do them. So you can define any kind of method. You can say, okay, go to home controller and ID action. This is what I said, that the first part you have to declare a controller, and then you have to declare action. And the router is really powerful because you can use this kind of naming in order to declare part of routes. So for example, and those names you can get it in the parameters, so via param, like for example what I mentioned here. So you can use any kind of regular expression in order to get that. System will know how to will be able to parse it in order to get this from path. So you can say it, okay, it's a digit, it's any kind of string, and you can go in n levels, so it doesn't have end. How you can declare also, for example, controller action, this always points to root module, so it's a default one, it's actually one which bootstrapped. But if you have actually actions, declaration of route in a submodule or any kind of other module, then you have to also declare name of the module.
Nest root?
What do you mean by nesting?
By nesting, like can you say, okay, just forward this URL to this module and it'll
yes,
know.
This is what it's actually doing. So this is, you can declare any kind of type of route. It could be dynamic, it could be static. What is dynamic is that you can use regular expressions and then you can point to parameters.
No, but what I mean is, so here I see on this example, I see that you have home/ID, that's for the home controller ID action. And then you have home/index,
yeah.
That's for different action.
Yeah.
Can you just say, hey, anything that goes with home, just hand it off to
yes.
home controller?
Yeah, you can use regular expression in order to say star, starting from this path star forwarded there. So you can do that. And you have dynamic route. What that means is that you can create your own class which implements route, and this is how you can pass request. Here you can have instance to your database, no matter which one it is. You can have any kind of injectable which you can have in your module. So it's getting any kind of injectable from your module, and you can have access to any kind of data source. You can query for your route, and then you can construct your basically iResolved route, which is basically this kind of structure, which then framework will be able to understand it, and it will forward you to correct controller action or module. This is handy for having dynamic routing. And the way how we do that, you just put it as an injectable and you extend it from iRoute, actually from route, and then you add this rule as a class token, and then system will know how to understand it. So what create URL does is actually reverse routing. So what it means is that you can say, okay, route name is, for example, a coordinate found, and then parameters, and then system will create opposite route. What it means, for example, when I get back where I have more routes, sorry, I will show you for example here. If I say, okay, create URL home ID, and then I provide as parameter ID and digit and name and string, it will actually create reverse route. It will create /1/name, for example. Oops, sorry. And how do you bootstrap module? You simply say run HTTP server on this module and on any kind of port. Why do we do this in separated file? Because it's implemented in a modulus. What we can do for testing, we are simulating requests. So we are having server-side integration test where you can fully simulate a route which will execute a complete stack and then return output to test. And what is also handy is what I also already mentioned when I had modulus, is that if you see that part of this service which you're building becoming too big, or you want to divide logic and you have separated routes already built it, you can just say, okay, take out this code and now put another file and bootstrap it on this module, and then you provide just which port. So you can provide different port. So this is how request flow goes. So at Bootstrap, what we do, we initialize all modules. So all modules which you have in the system, it will be constructed, and all dependencies for the modules will be also initialized. And they are singletons until if you declare any kind of dependency at any kind of module, then you will get a new instance. So for example, if you have provider of same token in one module and provider of same token in other module, it will create two different instances. And if you do it at the controller level, because controller is a new instance on each request, it will instantiate same token on each request. So how this works, it's so request goes to application, and then it's first goes to router mechanism, which will parse route, and it will see, okay, I have this route, and then it will try to find module. If it finds a module, then it will try to find controller. If it finds controller, it will process actions. If it finds action, it will execute this action, and this is how it. But first, what it does, it executes filters before controller for same purpose, because we have caching or whatever kind of purpose you need it, and also providers for controllers, which I already mentioned. And this is then action chain, which is executed from top to bottom. Any questions? No. Okay. And we also want to achieve easy testability. What it means is that we want to have a nice way that we can test unit testing, and that we can do unit testing, and then we can actually simulate any kind of request. And this is how we can do it. So we can fake HTTP server, and I can fire any kind of request. If it's GET, then I have API which gives me body or status code or headers, which you can see any kind of result. And if you need some kind of post that you need to send kind of data stream, you just say, okay, post, and then you send a buffer, a second parameter, and you will get expected result. Now I will show you a little bit of code. So I learned there's a, for example, yeah, I didn't mention views, but I said it's MVC. As you can see here, sorry, where I am currently, okay, not this one. Yeah, so as you can see here, you can choose any kind of templating engine. It's your choice. You have a lot of templating engines for Node.js. And what you can do, you can just say, okay, this is my component, like emu2. What it does, when I call this function, it will get this template and it will process it. You can do it same as service. And what you have to do is you have to hook it to your module, as I mentioned it, and then the system will be able to understand it. So also, what I can show you a little bit here, so this is one example which I showed in Angular group when I had Angular talk. So this is talking currently to this application, and it knows this is just a simple application which has a login to application. Actually, it has one route and it's executed, and I can show you right now. What is also good with modules is that the module doesn't have to have necessary controllers. So it could be any kind of logic which you want to share through many modules, and all you have to do, you can export any kind of token to be visible at your module. Here you can see that I have admin module, which has a user controller, which basically what it does, it creates a dummy user so I can log into this simple website, which I just show you. Also, what you can see here is that I have a core controller, which also can load any kind of asset. What is asset? It's any kind of file it will process it as a buffer and send it to browser. So basically, when you request it from browser. So so far, also we have some. What is also good, we can have any kind of custom decorators. So for example, like this one, that you can use, produce any kind of output, and then we can react for you. For example, we can see if this is an object and you didn't convert it as a string, then we can do that. Also, what was good for us, because we have also a lot of Java EE teams, and we use JAX and REST mostly, and I wanted to build kind of similar API that if they want to work with it, that they are able to understand it easily. So TypeScript gives you nice features. Who uses TypeScript, by the way? Okay, nice. So basically, like typing and any kind of API which you, for example, here, if I want to do something like, okay, which, yeah, for example, if I say, why it's really good, is if I say these users, and then I have any kind of types, and I don't have to take a look. I don't have to take a look into documentation. You have this with TypeScript, not with this framework. So this is really handy, why we like it. Besides that, that's in short what I have. Do you have any questions right now? No? Okay, then I think I'm done.